The great crystal dome of Nexus Prime stretched toward 3 purple suns. Inside the massive building, 12 different alien species gathered for their most important meeting. The Galactic Council only met like this once every 1,000 years. Today they would count who lived and who had died out across the galaxy. Commander Kyle stood at the speaker's platform. His reptilian skin gleamed green under the bright lights. The Vorthak were proud warriors, but even they showed respect during the remembrance ceremony. Kale's voice echoed through the dome as he began the ancient ritual. We remember the crystal singers who made music from starlight, gone for 2,000 years. The crowd of aliens nodded silently. Some had feathers, others had tentacles. A few looked like walking trees, but they all understood loss. We remember the deep swimmers who lived in the hearts of gas giants, lost 1,500 years ago. Kale continued down the list. Each name represented an entire species that no longer existed. The galaxy was a lonely place. Life was precious because it could disappear so easily. We remember the humans, who called themselves the children of Earth. They spread across 1,000 worlds before the Great Plague took them, gone for 3,000 years. This part always made the crowd uncomfortable. Humans had been different from other species. They built cities, on worlds that killed other aliens. They fixed things that seemed impossible to repair. They never gave up, even when they should have. Some species still found human ruins on distant planets, empty cities that felt like graveyards. Dr. Una shifted in her seat. She was one of the few experts who studied dead civilizations. Her people, the Ethers, were tall and thin like living shadows. They lived longer than most species, so they remembered more history. Una had spent her whole life learning about extinct aliens, but humans fascinated her most. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. Then the representatives began talking about trade routes, territorial disputes, and mining rights. Normal. Business. The dead were remembered, but life moved forward. 3 days later, something impossible happened. Station Monitor 7 was old and mostly forgotten. It floated at the edge of Vorthak space, listening for dangerous signals from the dead zones. The dead zones were areas where radiation or war had made planets uninhabitable. Most species avoided them completely. The station's computer picked up a signal. At first, the artificial intelligence thought it was just space noise, but the pattern was too organized, too purposeful. This is Captain Daehyun of the Earth Reclamation Fleet. We are coming home. The AI checked its language databases. The words were Korean, an ancient human language, but that was impossible. Humans were extinct, had been for 3,000 years. The AI filed the message as a computer error and continued its work. But the messages kept coming. Station Deepwatch detected another signal 2 days later. Supply. Convoy Alpha requesting docking clearance at Luna Base. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Station Outer Ring heard something different. Medical team standing by for civilian evacuation. Transport ships moving to safe distance. By the end of the week, 17 monitoring stations had recorded similar transmissions, all in ancient human languages, all suggesting that humans were not only alive but organized. The messages talked about fleets, bases, and operations. They sounded like a military getting ready for something big. Dr. Una received the reports at her research facility on Nexus Prime. She was studying ancient human artwork when her assistant brought the data files. Her long fingers moved quickly through the holographic displays, checking each message carefully. The linguistic patterns matched perfectly with human ruins she had studied. But there were differences too. The language had changed over time. New words, new sentence structures, as if the language had grown and developed during the centuries of silence. Impossible, she whispered, but the evidence was right in front of her. She tried to contact the monitoring stations for more information. Most responded normally, but Station Monitor 7 had gone silent. So had Deepwatch and Outer Ring. 3 stations in different sectors had all stopped responding after detecting human signals. Una requested a meeting with the council leadership. Commander Kyle listened to her report with growing concern. His warrior instincts told him this meant trouble. Species didn't just come back from extinction, and if they did, they might not be friendly. Could it be a hoax? He asked. Someone trying to trick us with old recordings? The transmissions are too sophisticated, Una replied, and they reference current stellar positions. Whoever sent them knows exactly where they are in space and time. The ether scientist pulled up a star map. Red dots marked where the signals had originated. All of them came from the same general direction. The old human territories. The dead zones where no one was supposed to live. There's more, she said quietly. I've been checking our own records. Over the past 6 months, we've had reports of strange activities in 17 sectors. Ships arriving at ports with their cargo mysteriously improved. Medical supplies that work better than they should. Technology that's been upgraded by unknown hands. Kale's eyes narrowed. You think humans are responsible? I think someone is preparing the galaxy for something, and they're doing it quietly, carefully, like they don't want to be noticed yet. The meeting ended with a decision to send investigation teams to the dead zones, but bureaucracy moved slowly, and the council needed time to organize properly. Time they might not have. Meanwhile, at the edge of Vorthak space, the merchant ship, Golden Current, was finishing its regular supply run. Captain Strix had been flying the same route for 20 years. He knew every asteroid and gas cloud between the inner planets and the frontier. That's why he noticed the ships immediately. They appeared on his sensors like ghosts, massive vessels that seemed to be made of shadow and starlight. They moved in, perfect formation, heading toward the inner systems. Strix had never seen ships like them before. They didn't match any known design. He opened a communication channel. Unknown vessels, this is merchant ship Golden Current. Please identify yourselves. Silence. He tried again. You are entering Vorthak territory. All ships must register with traffic control. Still nothing. The ship simply continued their course, passing his small vessel like he didn't exist. Strix watched his screens in amazement. The energy readings were incredible. These ships had power sources beyond anything in the galaxy, but they moved with impossible grace as if they weighed nothing at all. He reached for his communications array to report the sighting, but his equipment had stopped working. All of it. Navigation, communications, even life support warnings. Everything electronic on his ship had gone dead. The last thing Strix saw was one of the strange ships turning toward him. It moved without engines, without any visible propulsion. A beam of soft light touched his vessel, then everything went dark. When rescue teams found the Golden Current 3 days later, they discovered something extraordinary. The ship was in perfect condition. Better than perfect. Every system had been upgraded with technology they couldn't understand. The life support could now run for years instead of months. The engines were 3 times more efficient. Even the food synthesizers produced meals that tasted better than anything they had ever eaten. But Captain Strix was gone. His personal log contained only one final entry. They're beautiful. I understand now. We were wrong about everything. The Golden Current incident reached Council headquarters within hours. Combined with Dr. Yuna's research and the mysterious signals, the evidence was overwhelming. Something was happening in the dead zones. Something connected to humanity's lost worlds. Commander Kale stood in the council chamber, looking at reports from across the galaxy. The pattern was becoming clear. For months, maybe years, someone had been secretly helping other species, improving their technology, healing their sick, making barren worlds fertile. But they had stayed hidden. Until now. The signals were getting stronger, more frequent, and they all carried the same basic message. Humanity was coming home. Prepare the investigation fleets, Kale ordered. We're going to the dead zones. Whatever's out there, we need to know what we're dealing with. As the council began making plans, none of them noticed the small observation probe watching from outside their building. It had been there for days, recording everything, learning about them. When the probe had enough information, it simply faded away, like it had never existed at all. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, Captain Daehyun received the probe's report. He was a tall man with kind eyes, but something about him seemed different. Wrong. as if he existed in more than 3 dimensions. "They know we're coming," he said to his crew. "Begin the final preparations." Around him, his ship hummed with power that could reshape worlds. But Daehyun was thinking about something else. About Earth. About home. About the family he had lost 3,000 years ago. They were coming home. But home had changed. And so had they. The war was about to begin. Captain Jinwoo had commanded exploration ships for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this. His vessel, the Starseeker, approached the edge of the Terran exclusion zone with extreme caution. This area of space had been forbidden territory for 3,000 years. The exclusion zone contained dozens of worlds where humans once lived. After the Great Plague destroyed their civilization, other species had declared these planets too dangerous to visit. Radiation, biological weapons, and automated defense systems made the region a graveyard that no one wanted to disturb. But now the Council needed answers. The mysterious signals were getting stronger every day. Someone had to investigate. "Sensors are picking up strange readings," reported Lieutenant Soman from her station. She was young for such an important mission, but her technical skills were legendary among the Vorthak military. "The radiation levels should be deadly, but they're actually decreasing as we get closer." Jinwoo studied the display screens. The dead zone looked different than the old maps showed. Several planets that should have been barren rocks now showed signs of atmosphere. Others had vegetation where nothing should grow. "Sir, you need to see this," called out Navigation Officer Hyunwoo. His voice carried a note of disbelief. "I'm detecting artificial structures on Mars, big ones, and they're not in our historical records." The red planet appeared on their main screen. Mars had been one of humanity's first colony worlds. The Council's archives showed it as a dead, empty place covered in ancient ruins. But now massive towers reached toward the sky. Gardens of green-covered areas that should have been desert. Lights moved in patterns that suggested a living city. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Yuna. She had joined the expedition as the Council's expert on human archaeology. "Mars was abandoned. We have proof. Survey teams confirmed it was empty 2 centuries ago. But the evidence contradicted everything they thought they knew. As they moved deeper into the system, more impossible sites appeared. Europa showed signs of underwater cities. Titan had massive industrial complexes that hadn't existed before. Even small asteroids showed evidence of mining and construction. Someone had been very busy in the dead zones. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," reported Communications Officer Min-hee. "It's an ancient Earth standard. The message says, 'Welcome to Sol System. Please state your business and intentions.'" Every person on the bridge froze. Sul was the old human name for their home star, but no one was supposed to be alive to send such a message. Jinwoo made a decision. "Respond. That we're here on a peaceful investigation mission for the Galactic Council. Tell them we're not hostile." The response came immediately. "Understood, Council ship. You may proceed to Mars Orbital Station. Follow the guidance beacons. Any attempt to deviate will result in immediate escort back to the system edge. Guidance." Beacons began appearing on their sensors, sophisticated technology that definitely hadn't been there before. The Starseeker followed the path toward Mars, passing automated defense platforms that tracked their movement with disturbing precision. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other strange events were being reported. On the agricultural world of New Harvest, farmers woke up to find their failing crops completely healthy overnight. The plant disease that had threatened to destroy their food supply had simply vanished. In its place, they found new varieties of grain that grew twice as fast and tasted better than anything they had ever produced. The miners on asteroid base Theta 7 discovered that their equipment had been upgraded while they slept. Drilling machines that should have taken weeks to cut through solid rock now carved through it like butter. Their ore processors were producing pure metals with efficiency levels that should have been impossible. On the medical station orbiting Kepler 442, Dr. Chehi found herself facing the most puzzling case of her career. A patient dying from crimson fever had been completely cured overnight. Not just treated, but cured. The disease was gone from his system as if it had never existed. Even more strange, his medical files now contained treatment notes written in a script she didn't recognize. All across 17 different sectors, the same pattern repeated. Ships arrived at destinations to find their cargo mysteriously improved. Broken equipment was repaired by unknown hands. Sick people were healed by methods no one understood. Medical supplies became more effective. Food lasted longer and tasted better, but no one ever saw who was responsible. Back in the Sol system, Captain Jinwoo's team prepared to dock with the Mars orbital station. The structure was enormous, easily 10 times larger than any space station in the galaxy. It seemed to be built from materials that absorbed and reflected light in impossible ways, making it look like it was made from captured starlight. "Sir, the station is scanning us," reported Sumin. "But it's not any scanning technology I recognize. It feels like it's looking through us rather than at us." A docking tube extended from the station and attached to their ship with perfect precision. The airlock sealed with a soft hiss. On the other side waited something that made the entire crew step backward in shock. The figure looked human, but not quite right. She was tall and graceful, with dark hair and kind eyes that seemed to hold the depth of space itself. When she moved, she seemed to shimmer slightly, as if she wasn't completely solid. "Welcome," she said in perfect galactic standard. "I am Dr. Minnie. We've been expecting you." Captain Jinwoo found his voice. "We're here investigating reports of activity in the exclusion zone. The Galactic Council needs to understand what's happening." Dr. Minhee smiled sadly. "What's happening is that we're coming home. Though home has changed quite a bit since we left." "We?" asked Dr. Yuna. "You're human." "I was human," Minhee replied. "We all were. But 3,000 years of living in places where life shouldn't exist has changed us. We adapted. We evolved. We became something new while trying to stay something old." She led them through corridors that seemed to bend in ways that hurt their eyes. The walls showed views of space, but from angles that shouldn't exist. Other humans moved through the station, and all of them had that same shimmer, that same sense of being not quite entirely there. "Your people thought we died out," Minhee explained as they walked. "And in a way they were right. The humans who lived on worlds like Earth couldn't survive what came next. But some of us escaped to the edges of the galaxy, to places so hostile that even the plague couldn't follow. They entered a vast chamber filled with holographic displays. The images showed star systems, planets, and what looked like construction projects on a massive scale. Jinwoo realized he was looking at preparation for something huge. "We learned to live in the hearts of gas giants," Minhee continued. "We made homes in the radiation storms around neutron stars. We survived in the dark matter clouds between galaxies, environments that would kill any normal life form." Lieutenant Somin stared at the displays. "How is that possible? When survival is the only option, life finds a way. We merged with technology. We learned to exist partially in subspace. We discovered how to draw energy directly from stellar radiation. What started as desperate modifications became permanent changes." Dr. Yuna leaned forward. "The helpful incidents across the galaxy, ships being improved overnight, sick people being healed. That's you?" Minhee nodded. "We've been preparing the galaxy for our return, making sure the species we once knew were healthy and strong. You'll need to be ready for what's coming." "What's coming?" asked Captain Jinwoo. The human woman looked out at the stars through a window that showed impossible views of folded space. "Change. Evolution. The next step in galactic civilization. But first, we need to reclaim our place among the stars." She turned back to face them, and for a moment her form became translucent. "We never left, Captain. We just learned to live where others cannot. But now it's time to come home." As if responding to her words, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Not danger alarms, but notification signals. On the displays around them, new contacts appeared, hundreds of them. Ships emerging from subspace, from gas giant storms, from the hearts of stars themselves. "The fleet has arrived," Minhee said quietly. 3,000 years of preparation are about to begin paying off. Captain Jinwoo watched the displays in amazement and growing fear. Each of the approaching ships was larger than anything in the Galactic Council's navy. They moved with impossible grace, seeming to bend space around them rather than pushing through it. "How many ships do you have?" he asked. Minhee's smile was sad but determined. "Enough to reclaim every world we once called home. Enough to reshape the galaxy if necessary. We hope it won't come to that." She gestured to the displays showing peaceful improvements across 17 sectors. "We've spent months making sure other species are ready for our return, healing their sick, improving their technology, preparing them for partnership." "And if they refuse?" asked Dr. Yuna. The human woman's form shimmered more intensely. Around them, the station hummed with power that could probably destroy entire solar systems. But her voice remained gentle. "Then we'll do what we've always done. We'll adapt. We'll survive, and we'll find another way." Outside the station, the human fleet continued to arrive. Ships that looked like living shadows and captured starlight. Technology that seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal space could contain. The Galactic Council chamber had never seen chaos like this. Representatives from 12 species shouted at each other in a dozen different languages. Emergency sessions were supposed to be calm and organized. This looked more like a riot. Engineer Taehyun stood at the center of the storm, waiting patiently. He was the official human representative chosen to speak for his entire species. But looking at him made many aliens uncomfortable. His eyes held the deep darkness of space between stars. When he spoke, his voice carried sounds that seemed to come from multiple dimensions. "Please," he said quietly, but somehow everyone heard him perfectly. "Let me explain what happened to us." Commander Kale slammed his scaled fist on his desk. "Explain? Your people have been secretly operating in our space for months. You've been changing our equipment without permission. You've been healing our people with methods we don't understand." "We were helping," Taehyun replied calmly, "preparing you for our return." "By treating us like children who can't take care of themselves?" The human's strange eyes showed sadness. "By treating you like the friends we remembered, the allies we hoped you still were." Dr. Yuna had spent the last week studying footage of the human fleet. The ships moved in ways that broke the laws of physics. They could appear inside solid objects, travel faster than light without using hyperspace, and seem to draw power from empty vacuum itself. "How is any of this possible?" she asked. 3,000 years ago, humans were advanced but still bound by the same physical laws as everyone else. Taehyun gestured, and holographic images appeared in the air around him. They showed the progression of human evolution over the centuries. The images were beautiful but disturbing. "When we fled to the dead zones, we had no choice but to adapt," he explained. "Normal biology couldn't survive in neutron star radiation fields. Traditional technology failed in dark matter storms. We had to become something new or die completely." The images showed humans slowly merging with their technology. Bodies that could phase between dimensions. Minds that could process quantum information directly. Life forms that existed partially in normal space and partially in realms beyond conventional reality. "We didn't choose this evolution," Taehyun continued. "It was forced on us by environments that should have killed us. But we survived. We learned. We grew into something that could thrive where no one else could live." Admiral Szczek of the Serpentine. Naga species coiled nervously. "And now you want to reclaim your old territories? The worlds we've been using for 2,000 years? We want to come home," Taehyun said simply. "But home has changed. So have we. We hope we can find a way to share it." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species welcomed humanity's return. The ethers saw it as a miracle of survival against impossible odds. The peaceful Thalans offered to help humans resettle on water worlds, but others reacted with fear and suspicion. The Vorthak military began mobilizing their fleets. The territorial Greeks started building new defense platforms around worlds that had once been human colonies. Dr. Jihoon, humanity's chief diplomat, tried to calm the growing tensions. He offered to share human medical advances that could extend alien lifespans by centuries. He presented agricultural techniques that could end hunger across the galaxy. He showed clean energy technologies that could power entire civilizations without harmful side effects. But for every hand extended in friendship, another species pulled back in fear. The humans were too different now, too powerful, too alien despite their familiar appearance. The situation got worse when human settlements began appearing overnight on empty worlds. Not invasions or conquests, but entire cities that simply materialized from nothing. Humans phased into reality and began rebuilding with efficiency that seemed impossible. Commander Yura of the Human Reclamation Corps tried to coordinate peaceful resettlement. But the legal problems were enormous. Treaties signed during humanity's absence had given other species rights to former human worlds. Some planets now had thriving alien colonies. "We're not asking anyone to leave," Yura explained to a meeting of colonial governors. "We can exist in the same spaces as you. Our dimensional technology allows multiple civilizations to share the same worlds without interfering with each other." Governor Threx of the mining colony on Kepler 438 wasn't convinced. "You expect us to believe you can live on our world without affecting us? Your people walk through solid matter. Your ships appear inside our atmosphere without warning. How do we know you won't decide we're in your way?" The fears seemed justified when Colonel Dohyun arrived with a fleet of hardline human ships. Unlike the diplomatic humans, Dohyun represented the faction that wanted immediate restoration of all former human territories. "We've been patient long enough," he announced during a heated council session. "Humans built cities on 1,000 worlds. We spread civilization to every corner of this galaxy. While we were gone, others moved in like scavengers picking at a corpse." His ships began taking positions around disputed worlds. They didn't attack the alien colonies, but their presence sent a clear message. The humans were back, and some of them weren't interested in negotiation. The crisis reached a breaking point at the small agricultural world of New Eden. The planet had been a human farming colony before the plague. After humanity's disappearance, refugees from 3 different species had settled there. Now it supported 2 million aliens who had called it home for generations. When human ships appeared in the system, panic spread through the colonists. They had heard rumors about humans who could walk through walls and control gravity itself. Stories about technology that could remake entire worlds overnight. The human ships took orbit around New Eden but made no hostile moves. Instead, they sent a simple message. "This world was once ours. We would like to return to it. We believe we can share it with you in peace." But fear overrode reason. The Colonial Defense Force, commanded by Admiral Crix, decided that the human presence was too dangerous to tolerate. They opened fire on the human ships. What happened next shocked everyone watching. The weapons passed harmlessly through the human vessels. Energy beams, missiles, even kinetic projectiles simply had no effect. The humans existed in a state where normal physics couldn't touch them. One of the human ships moved closer to the attacking fleet. It didn't fire weapons or release any obvious threats. Instead, it simply appeared inside the shield envelope of the lead alien cruiser. The cruiser's crew found themselves face to face with Captain Minji, who had somehow materialized on their bridge. She looked completely human except for the way light seemed to bend around her. "We don't want to fight you," she told the stunned alien crew. "We just want to come home." She left behind a gift, a collection of art, music, and literature from Earth's golden age, stories and songs that showed what humanity had been before their exile, a reminder of the civilization that had once spread hope and wonder across the galaxy. Then she vanished, taking her ship with her. The message was clear. Humans could go anywhere, do anything, but they chose restraint. They could have destroyed the entire defense fleet without effort, but instead they offered culture and beauty. But not all humans shared Captain Minji's gentle approach. General Sang commanded the most aggressive human faction. His ships began systematically approaching former human worlds. When they encountered alien resistance, they didn't use violence in any traditional sense. Instead, they used their dimensional abilities to relocate entire populations. alien colonies simply found themselves transported to other worlds. Often, better worlds, but without any choice in the matter. From the human perspective, they were being generous. From the alien perspective, they were being conquered by beings who could rewrite reality. Dr. Yunji watched these developments with growing alarm. She was one of the few humans who still looked completely normal, having avoided the more extreme evolutionary changes. Her research showed a dangerous pattern. "We're losing ourselves," she reported to the human leadership. "The more we use our abilities, the further we drift from our original nature. Some of our people can barely remember what it was like to be truly human." Her warnings proved prophetic when Contact Team 7 simply vanished during a routine diplomatic mission. They had been negotiating with the Grex Federation about mining rights. Security footage showed them gradually becoming more translucent during the talks, until they faded away entirely. They were found 3 days later, existing as pure energy beings in the heart of a nearby star. They could still communicate, but they no longer understood concepts like hunger, sleep, or physical comfort. They had evolved beyond biology entirely. The other galactic species watched these developments with increasing terror. If humans continued to evolve at this pace, they would soon become something completely alien, and if they retained their desire to reclaim former territories, they would be unstoppable. Admiral Hyunwoo of the Thalanian Defense Force summed up what many were thinking. How do you negotiate with beings who can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously? How do you defend against enemies who can appear inside your ships, your cities, even inside your own bodies? The question hanging over the galaxy was simple, but terrifying. Were humans still human enough to be reasoned with? Or had 3,000 years of evolution created something so alien that the first battle of the Second Human War didn't look like any conflict in galactic history? Admiral Sunwoo's human fleet faced the combined might of the Vorthak Navy in the Kepler 442 system, but the two sides might as well have been fighting in different universes. The Vorthak ships fired everything they had: plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, gravity bombs that could crack planets. Their weapons lit up space with enough energy to power entire star systems. But the human ships simply weren't there to be hit. They phased between dimensions, appearing inside the Vorthak formation and vanishing before return fire could reach them. They struck from impossible angles, emerging from the hearts of gas giants and the cores of asteroids. Some human vessels seemed to attack from multiple locations simultaneously. Admiral Crix watched his proud fleet being taken apart by enemies he could barely see. "How do you fight ghosts?" he asked his tactical officer. The answer came quickly and brutally. You didn't fight them at all. You surrendered, or you were removed from the battlefield in ways that made conventional defeat seem merciful. But the humans weren't killing their opponents. That would have been simple. Instead, they were doing something much more disturbing. Captain Minji materialized on the bridge of the Vorthak flagship without triggering any alarms or defenses. She walked through solid bulkheads like they were made of mist. When security guards fired at her, their weapons had no effect. "Admiral Crix," she said politely, "we need to talk." The reptilian commander backed away from this impossible intruder. "What do you want?" "The same thing we've always wanted. To come home. To live in peace with the neighbors we remember fondly." She gestured around the bridge where Vorthak crew members stood frozen in shock. "But some of you seem determined to make that difficult." She didn't threaten anyone. She didn't need to. Her mere presence proved that human technology was so far advanced that resistance was meaningless. She could have taken control of every ship in the fleet without effort. Instead, she left behind gifts. Art from ancient Earth. Music that told stories of human dreams and hopes. Literature that showed what her people had been before their exile. A reminder that these impossible beings had once been explorers and builders, not conquerors. "We remember who we used to be," she said as she prepared to leave. "Do you remember who you wanted to become?" Then she vanished, taking her fleet with her. The Vorthak ships were left floating in space, completely undamaged but somehow changed. Every system had been improved. Weapons were more efficient. Life support could run for years instead of months. Even the food tasted better. The message was clear. Humans could have destroyed the entire fleet in seconds. Instead, they had made it better. But not all human commanders shared Captain Minji's gentle approach. General Sang represented the hardline faction that viewed the current galactic order as thieves squatting on human property. His forces took a very different approach to reclamation. When the Grex mining colonies on Europa refused to evacuate, Sang's ships didn't attack the installations. Instead, they did something much more frightening. They relocated the entire population to a parallel dimension. One moment, 50,000 Grex miners were working in the ice caves of Europa. The next moment, they simply weren't there anymore. Their equipment remained. Their cities were intact. But every living being had vanished. They were found 3 days later, alive and unharmed on a world that existed in folded space. The planet was actually better than Europa, with richer mineral deposits and more comfortable living conditions. From Sang's perspective, he had given them an upgrade. From the Grex' perspective, they had been kidnapped by beings who could rewrite reality. "We're not hurting anyone," Sang explained to the horrified Galactic Council. "We're giving displaced aliens better worlds than the ones they lost. Everyone benefits." But the other species saw it differently. If humans could relocate entire populations without warning, no one was safe. Planets with billions of inhabitants could be emptied overnight, their people scattered across dimensions like dust in the wind. Dr. Yunji watched these developments with growing alarm. Her research showed that the war was changing humanity in dangerous ways. The more they used their dimensional abilities, the further they drifted from their original nature. "We're losing what made us human," she warned the human high command. "Our people are becoming something else entirely." Her fears were confirmed when Contact Team 12 returned from a diplomatic mission to the Ether homeworld. They had been gone for only 3 days, but something fundamental had changed about them. They still looked human mostly, but they spoke about concepts that made no sense to normal minds. They talked about existing in 17 dimensions simultaneously. They described colors that had no names and sounds that existed outside the range of perception. Lieutenant Bora, who had been perfectly normal when she left, now seemed to phase in and out of reality. "Time moves differently when you're not trapped in linear causality," she explained to her worried teammates. "I can see all possible futures branching out like a tree. It's beautiful." She was no longer entirely human. None of Contact Team 12 were. They had evolved during their brief mission, becoming something that could barely relate to their original species. The transformation was accelerating across the human fleet. Soldiers who spent too much time using dimensional technology began to lose touch with physical reality. They forgot what it felt like to be hungry or tired. They stopped understanding why normal humans needed sleep or companionship. Captain Guangho commanded one of the most advanced human ships, a vessel that existed in 9 dimensions simultaneously. He had been fighting the evolutionary pressure longer than most, but even he was beginning to change. "I remember having a family," he told Dr. Yunji during one of her research interviews. "A wife and children back on Earth. But the memories feel like they belong to someone else. Like I'm remembering a movie I watched long ago." His ship was a marvel of evolved human technology. It could appear anywhere in the galaxy instantly. It could phase through any defense. It could manipulate matter and energy with godlike precision. But Guangho was no longer sure he remembered why any of that mattered. The crisis deepened when the peaceful Thalanian Federation attempted to negotiate a ceasefire. Their delegation, led by Ambassador Hana, met with human representatives in neutral space. The meeting started well. The humans seemed willing to discuss territorial compromises and shared governance. But as the talks progressed, something went wrong. The human negotiators began flickering between dimensions. They started speaking in languages that didn't exist, using concepts that had no meaning in normal reality. By the end of the session, they had evolved so far beyond baseline humanity that communication became impossible. Ambassador Hana watched in horror as the beings across the table transformed into something that might have once been human, but no longer bore any resemblance to the species she had hoped to make peace with. "What are you becoming?" she whispered. The answer came from multiple dimensions at once in voices that harmonized across frequencies of reality. "We are what we must be to survive. We are what evolution demands. We are the future." But they were no longer human in any meaningful sense. The war took on a new dimension of terror as both sides realized what was happening. The humans weren't just reclaiming their territory. They were undergoing a transformation that would make them incompatible with normal life. If the process continued, they would become beings of pure thought and energy, godlike entities who could reshape reality at will. But they would also lose everything that had once made them recognizably human. The other galactic species faced an impossible choice. They could surrender to beings who were becoming living gods, hoping those gods would be merciful. Or they could fight a war against enemies who grew more powerful with every battle. Admiral Hyunwoo of the Thalanian Defense Force made the decision that changed everything. We can't fight them conventionally, but maybe we can slow down their evolution long enough to find another solution. His scientists had been studying the human transformation process. They discovered that the evolutionary pressure was strongest during combat and high-stress situations. If they could find a way to keep humanity calm and peaceful, the changes might stabilize. But that meant ending the war, and ending the war meant giving humanity what they wanted. The question was whether there would be any humans left to give it to. Standing on the bridge of his impossible ship, Captain Daehyun felt his humanity slipping away like water through his fingers. He could perceive 17 dimensions simultaneously. He could manipulate matter and energy with a thought. He could exist in multiple locations at once, but he could no longer remember what his wife's laugh had sounded like. He couldn't recall the taste of food or the warmth of sunlight on his skin. The memories of being human felt like stories someone else had told him. Around him, his crew was undergoing the same transformation. They were becoming something magnificent and terrible. They were evolving into beings of unlimited power and capability, but they were losing their souls in the process. The war was changing everyone involved. The humans were becoming gods. The other species were learning what it meant to be completely outmatched. And somewhere in the space between those extremes, the future of the galaxy was. The disaster began with the best of intentions. General Sang was attempting to relocate a gas giant to create more living space in the crowded Vega system. His ships had successfully moved asteroids and small planets before. A gas giant should have been no different. But something went wrong. Dr. Hana watched the readings from her laboratory on Nexus Prime with growing horror. The dimensional calculations were becoming unstable. The space around Vega was folding in ways that shouldn't be possible. "Emergency shutdown," she called to the human fleet. "Abort the operation immediately." But it was too late. The gas giant vanished from normal space, leaving behind a wound in reality itself. A dimensional rift opened where the planet had been, spreading outward like a crack in glass. The effects were immediate and catastrophic. 3 nearby star systems simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not empty. They ceased to be. The rift was unmaking reality itself, turning organized matter and energy back into primordial chaos. Captain Guangho's ship was the closest to the disaster. His crew watched in terror as their sensors detected the expanding zone of nothingness. At its current rate of growth, the rift would consume half the galaxy within a standard year. "We caused this," he said quietly to Dr. Yunji over the emergency communications channel. "Our technology did this." The implications were staggering. Humanity's evolution had tied them directly to the galaxy's quantum foundation. When they manipulated reality on such a massive scale, they risked destroying the framework that held everything together. But the immediate crisis required immediate action. The rift had to be stopped, regardless of the cost. What followed was the most unlikely alliance in galactic history. Human scientists worked alongside their former enemies to understand the growing disaster. Dr. Hana found herself collaborating with Vorthak engineer Sekth and the energy being Luminous Song, who represented the ether collective consciousness. The rift exists in 17 dimensions simultaneously, Hana explained during an emergency briefing. To seal it, we need technology from every major species: human dimensional manipulation, Vorthak quantum computing, ether energy control, Thelanian biological processors. The task seemed impossible. Species that had been shooting at each other days earlier now had to trust each other completely. Any mistake, any betrayal, any failure of coordination could result in the complete destruction of their galaxy. Captain Kyung commanded the combined evacuation fleet. Ships from 12 different species worked together to move billions of people away from the expanding rift. Human vessels that could phase through solid matter carried Vorthak families to safety. Ether energy beings provided power for Grek's industrial evacuation ships. But even as they saved lives, the transformation continued to affect humanity. The stress of the crisis was accelerating their evolution beyond all previous rates. Lieutenant, Bora had been partially transformed for weeks, but now she became something else entirely. During a rescue mission to evacuate a Thelanian colony, she simply dissolved into pure thought. Her consciousness spreading across multiple dimensions, she could still communicate, but only through quantum frequencies that required special equipment to detect. I can see the rift structure, her translated thoughts reported. It's not random destruction. It follows patterns based on consciousness itself. This discovery changed everything. The rift wasn't just unmaking matter and energy. It was specifically targeting organized thought, intelligence, life itself. As if reality was trying to reject the presence of minds complex enough to perceive multiple dimensions. Dr. Minhee made the breakthrough that saved everything and doomed humanity at the same time. Working with alien scientists she had never imagined she could trust, she found a way to collapse the rift back into stable space. But it required a sacrifice that no one wanted to make. We need to use human consciousness as a quantum anchor, she explained to the Joint Command Center. Our evolved minds can exist in the 17 dimensions where the rift is active. We can literally think it closed. The cost would be enormous. Every human who participated in the effort would complete their transformation immediately. They would become beings of pure energy and thought, losing their physical forms forever. Young diplomat Ji Young found herself making the most important decision in galactic history. She was one of the few humans who could still think clearly about both sides of their nature, the godlike beings they were becoming and the mortal species they had once been. If we do this, we save the galaxy, she said to the assembled human leadership. But we lose our humanity completely. We become something so evolved that we can never go back. And if we don't do it, asked Captain Daehyun, everyone dies. Every species, every world, every thought that has ever existed in our galaxy becomes nothing. The debate that followed lasted only minutes. They didn't have time for longer discussions. The rift was still growing, still consuming reality at an accelerating pace. In the end, 300,000 human volunteers agreed to make the ultimate sacrifice. They would anchor their consciousness in 17 dimensions simultaneously, using their evolved minds to weave reality back together. But first, they had to say goodbye to everything they had once been. Captain Jinwoo recorded a final message for the Galactic Archives. We came home to reclaim our place among the stars. Instead, we discovered that home had changed, and so had we. Maybe this is what we were always meant to become. Dr. Yuna, the archaeologist who had first studied the mysterious human signals, watched from her laboratory as 300,000 lights ascended from the human fleet. Each light had once been a person with memories, dreams, fears, and hopes. Now they were becoming something beyond such simple concepts. The process took 3 days. As the human volunteers spread their consciousness across multiple dimensions, reality began to stabilize around the growing rift. The wound in space slowly contracted, held closed by minds that existed partially outside normal physics. But the cost was even higher than expected. The effort required to seal the rift accelerated the evolution of every human in the galaxy. Not just the volunteers, but every member of the species underwent instantaneous transformation. In the space of 3 days, humanity, as a biological species, ceased to exist. They became something new, something magnificent and terrible and utterly alien. Captain Soyun was among the last to transform. She recorded her experience for posterity, speaking into a communication device even as her physical form began to dissolve. "I can see everything," she whispered. "Every star, every world, every living thought in the galaxy. I understand now why the universe evolved consciousness. We're not accidents. We're features. We're how reality learns to understand itself." Her form became translucent, then transparent, then simply not there in any conventional sense. But her presence could still be felt, like a warm breeze or a half-remembered song. The rift collapsed completely on the fourth day. Reality snapped back into stable configuration, leaving only a few areas of unusual space-time curvature to mark where the disaster had occurred. The galaxy was saved. Billions of lives had been preserved. The fundamental structure of existence itself had been restored. But humanity, as a species, was gone. In their place existed beings of pure thought and energy, entities that could manipulate matter and space, with nothing more than focused intention. They were godlike in their capabilities, immortal in their nature, unlimited in their potential. They were also completely alone in a way that no mortal being could understand. Dr. Yunji had been right. They had saved the galaxy by losing their souls. The other species watched in awe and terror as these new beings began to reshape reality around them. Barren worlds became gardens overnight. Dying stars were renewed with fresh fuel. The laws of physics themselves were gently adjusted to make life easier and more abundant. But the beings who had once been human could no longer remember what it felt like to be hungry or tired or afraid. They had transcended such limitations, but in doing so they had lost something essential about what they had once been. Standing in the center of what had once been the Sol system, the entity that had been Captain Daehyun contemplated the cost of their victory. Around him, reality flickered and bent as beings of unimaginable power worked to repair the damage caused by the war. They had come home to reclaim their place among the stars. Instead, they had become the stars themselves. The question now was whether such transcendent beings could find a way to coexist with the mortal species they had once been part of, or whether they would drift further and further away from the concept of life as anyone else understood it. The rift was sealed. The galaxy was safe. Evolution had reached its ultimate conclusion. But the price of that evolution was the complete transformation of the species that had paid it. Humanity had won, but humanity no longer existed to enjoy the victory. 5 years after the Great Transcendence, Ambassador Seungjae stood in a place that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. He was one of only 12 humans who had managed to maintain enough of their original nature to communicate with mortal species. The others had evolved so far beyond physical existence that they could barely remember what it meant to have a body. But Seungjae was different. Through careful meditation and technological assistance, he had anchored himself to his human memories while still embracing his evolved abilities. He could exist in multiple dimensions, manipulate matter with thought, and perceive the quantum structure of reality itself. But he still remembered what his mother's soup tasted like. That made him invaluable as a bridge between what humanity had become and what the other species remained. "We need to find a new way to live together," he explained to the emergency session of the Galactic Council. The representatives looked uncomfortable in his presence. His form flickered between solid matter and pure energy, making it hard to focus on him directly. "How do we coexist with beings who can reshape reality at will?" asked Commander Kale. The Vorthak military leader had aged considerably since the war began. The stress of facing enemies who could walk through walls and move planets had worn him down. Seungjae's answer surprised everyone. "By letting us help you become more than you are. Not like us, you would lose too much, but better versions of yourselves." The proposal was radical beyond anything the galaxy had ever considered. Instead of territorial division or forced evolution, Seungjae suggested a new type of civilization, one where different forms of existence could occupy the same space without conflict. Dr. Chae-young materialized beside the ambassador. She had been humanity's leading expert on dimensional technology before the transformation. Now she existed as a living equation, her consciousness spread across multiple layers of reality. We can expand the habitable zones of your galaxy, she explained, her voice coming from several dimensions at once. Create pocket universes where your species can thrive. Give you access to resources and energy sources you never imagined. The offer was tempting, but many species remained suspicious. The humans had evolved so far beyond normal life that their motivations were unclear. Were they genuinely trying to help, or was this some incomprehensible form of conquest? The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep in the archives of Nexus Prime, Dr. Yuna discovered something that changed everything. While studying the aftermath of the dimensional rift, she found evidence that humanity's evolution wasn't random. It followed patterns that suggested purpose. They're not becoming gods, she announced to the stunned council. They're becoming something more specific. They're turning into living bridges between different states of existence. Her research showed that the transformed humans could facilitate communication between dimensions, species, and even different forms of consciousness. They were evolving into universal translators for reality itself. Commander Wanho, one of the few humans who could still pilot conventional spacecraft, demonstrated the concept by establishing the first mixed colony. The world existed in normal space for the alien colonists, but extended into 17 dimensions where transcended humans could provide support. The results were extraordinary. Grex miners found that their equipment worked with impossible efficiency when assisted by dimensional beings. Thelanian farmers discovered that their crops grew faster and healthier when tended by entities who could perceive the quantum level of biological processes. Most importantly, the different species began to truly understand each other for the first time. With transcended humans serving as translators, Vorthak warriors could directly experience ether philosophy. Peaceful Thalans could comprehend the territorial instincts of the aggressive Grex, but the process wasn't easy. The hardline factions on both sides made their final desperate attempts to prevent this new form of coexistence. Colonel Do-hyun, who had undergone only partial transformation, launched one last effort to establish human supremacy. His followers attempted to claim exclusive control over dimensional technology, believing they could force the other species into subservient roles. The rebellion failed within hours. The fully transcended humans simply appeared around Do-hyun's forces and gently but irresistibly moved them to a distant system where they could pursue their isolationist dreams without affecting anyone else. Admiral Crix made a similar attempt, from the opposite direction. His forces tried to activate a quantum weapon designed to sever the connection between transcended humans and normal space-time. If successful, it would kill every evolved human in the galaxy. Captain Soyeon, now existing as pure consciousness, intercepted the weapon before it could fire. But instead of destroying it or punishing its creators, she did something that shocked everyone involved. She showed them a vision. Every being in the Crix fleet suddenly experienced what the galaxy could become. They saw worlds where different species worked together to build impossible wonders. They witnessed civilizations that spanned multiple dimensions where the boundaries between physical and energy beings became meaningless. They saw a future where the ancient dream of unity among the stars finally became reality. The weapon powered down. The rebellion ended not with defeat but with understanding. The transformation took 5 years to complete. Slowly, carefully, the galaxy reorganized itself around new principles of cooperation and mutual transcendence. Humans became the living infrastructure of this new civilization. They existed between dimensions, facilitating communication and providing support that made previously impossible achievements routine. They were no longer a species in any traditional sense, but they were still recognizably committed to the values they had always held. Other species began their own evolutionary journeys, though at a much slower and more controlled pace. The ethers learned to exist partially as energy beings. The Vorthak developed technologies that let them interface directly with quantum reality. The Thalans discovered they could merge temporarily with oceanic ecosystems across multiple worlds, but none of them lost their essential nature the way humans had. The transcended humans served as guides and guardians, ensuring that evolution enhanced rather than replaced what made each species unique. The hardest challenge wasn't technological. It was cultural. Dr. Jihoon worked with representatives from all major species to create new forms of society. Mixed communities where beings of vastly different capabilities could live together as equals despite their obvious differences. The breakthrough came when young Captain Minji established the first truly integrated settlement on a world that existed in 4 dimensions simultaneously. Alien families lived in traditional neighborhoods while transcended humans provided invisible support from parallel realities. Children played together in parks that spanned multiple layers of existence. A Grex youngster could compete in games with Vorthak hatchlings while human entities ensured everyone's safety from dimensions the children couldn't even perceive. It wasn't perfect. There were misunderstandings, accidents, and cultural conflicts, but it worked well enough to serve as a model for other communities. The real test came when the galaxy faced its first post-transformation crisis. A rogue black hole was detected, moving toward the heavily populated Centauri sector. Under the old system, billions would have died, and entire civilizations would have been lost. Instead, transcended humans working with evolved members of other species simply moved the threatened worlds to safer locations, not just the planets but their entire local space-time regions, preserving orbital mechanics and stellar relationships. The operation took 3 days and saved 47 billion lives. More importantly, it demonstrated that the new galactic civilization could handle problems that would have been impossible for any single species to solve. But the most significant change was psychological. Fear began to disappear from galactic culture. Not the healthy caution that kept people safe, but the deep terror of extinction that had driven so much conflict. When transcended beings could preserve consciousness, even if physical forms were destroyed, when dimensional technology made resources essentially unlimited, when different species could literally share each other's perspectives, the old reasons for war simply stopped making sense. Commander Kyle found himself working alongside former enemies on projects that would have been unimaginable 5 years earlier. Vorthak engineering teams collaborated with ether philosophers and human consciousness entities to build structures that existed across 17 dimensions simultaneously. I used to think strength came from being able to destroy your enemies, he reflected during one of the regular interspecies meetings. Now I think it comes from making sure you don't have any enemies to begin with. The transformation wasn't complete. There were still isolated groups that rejected the new order. Some species retreated to distant galaxies rather than adapt to coexistence with transcended beings. A few human entities became so evolved that they lost all connection to their origins and drifted away into higher dimensions. But these were exceptions. The vast majority of galactic civilization embraced the changes, finding opportunities and experiences they had never imagined possible. 10 years after first contact with the returning humans, Ambassador Seung-jae stood in the same